Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today I got another really interesting item here. This is it's the Jumper T16 Pro. This is the one that's making all the waves and driving everybody nuts because it's got dang near everything in it. It has Hall effect gimbals. It has internal multi-protocol module. It has this huge LCD screen. Really good radio. The ergonomics on it are a little bit different than what I'm used to. So I'm going to compare it to this, the tried and true FrSky X9D Plus. This has been the staple of the FPV community for a very long time. This radio here is kind of meant to shake things up. It's really given FrSky a run for its money. I know there was a bunch of drama a couple months back about cloning and whatever. You know, this company says this company cloned them, so don't buy from that company or we won't sell from this company. But another company that did that stuff earlier was doing the same thing. And I don't know. I don't really give a shit about that stuff. But this is what it is. This is what we have here. So right off the bat, it is a very different shape. It feels very different in the hand. The one thing I really notice is the placement of the gimbals versus where your hands sit on the radio. So on the T16, the gimbals are placed in a very different spot. It doesn't look like it's very different, but once you hold the radio, it really does feel different. The gimbals are, so in relationship to where your hands are, the gimbals are kind of like up here, whereas on the X9D, kind of picture placing your thumb between your middle finger, whereas on the Jumper your thumbs are above your index finger. You can see where my index fingers are versus where my thumbs sit. Compare that to the X9D. Very different placement. I don't know if it's coming across very well in the video, but it is a very different feel. And the only issue I have with that is I have a hard time reaching for the inner uppermost travel on the gimbals. It's a bit of a stretch to get there. The rest of the positions are pretty easy to get to, but compared to the Taranis, you know, there's no stretch whatsoever. So I think the ergonomics are, I'm not saying they're bad, they're just different. I've flown this quite a bit just in the house. The weather's been pretty bad, so I've just been flying my Tiny Hawk, and I have no complaints about the way this thing feels at all. The internal is a multi-protocol module, so you can have you can control FlySky, FrSky, Hubsan, like all those other manufacturers from the built-in multi-protocol module. And then the other trick this has is you could put say an R9 module or even a Crossfire in the back and not have to ever really change anything to fly pretty much anything out there. But flying around, the gimbals feel very smooth. They're not, they're not metal. This is still a plastic housing and a plastic gimbal part here, whereas the Taranis stuff is aluminum plates with, I'm pretty sure that's an aluminum gimbal on the inside there. But anyways, so let's go ahead and fire this guy up. It does run OpenTX, just kind of a Jumper version of OpenTX, and it is being supported by OpenTX now. All right, so the interface is pretty interesting. It does look very FrSky-esque. The button layout is very different. I find myself struggling navigating through the menus. So you have two buttons up here. You have System and Return. This one is Model, Page, and Telemetry. These are very, very hard to read. It's just very subtle raised lettering. I don't know if you can see that there. But when you're using this, it's extremely hard to see what these are. Obviously, the more you use it, the easier it's going to be to figure out over time. And then it has the scrolling click wheel on the side here. This is pretty anemic. I'm actually very disappointed in this. You can see the knurling is very flat on the top, so it doesn't really grip your thumb very well, especially if you have really calloused thumbs like I got, you just kind of skate right over it. And the click action is not very satisfying at all. It kind of has this weird like click, click, like double click to it. Whereas like the X9 Lite, this thing is nice and sharp. It scrolls really easily, and it's a very positive, just a very positive click to it. So, I mean, I really like the rolling wheel here, but I don't know, I think they could have done better by kind of pointing those out instead of flattening them like they did. And the system menus are very much just like OpenTX. They're just kind of all in a different place. So if you hold down your system button, it's just like holding down the menu button on your old Taranis, if you had a Taranis, and you get to your typical OpenTX system menu where you can set the time and all that other stuff. Same thing, accessing the SD card, global functions, trainer port, all your hardware calibration and switch setup is right here. And the information, so at the time of doing this, it says Jumper TX 2.3.0, release date 8/27/19. It does not come with an SD card, and it doesn't come with batteries. And to turn it off, it's kind of the hold the button and wait for it to shut off thing. Now, really interesting thing, so you can't charge the batteries externally, and this battery cover is a total bear to get off of here. It comes with this little tray that holds 2 of your standard 18650 packs, and your SD card goes there in the back. Jumper has done something really interesting. They've made it so you can adjust your gimbal tension without having to disassemble the radio. You just pull those little rubber grips off and you can access your adjustments. You can't see them all just because of the lighting, but you can make some adjustments through there so you don't have to disassemble this thing. And if you're wondering about this stuff here, this is a grip material that I designed and I cut. I have it for sale on my Etsy store. Check it out in the description below. Really good stuff. You really don't know what you're missing out on until you give it a shot. So I've got it on the backs, the front, and up on the top. I kind of designed it to be for either thumbers or pinchers. This is really good for pinching. This radio is not light, and myself, I don't like running a neck strap. It is slightly lighter than the X9D, but not by much. It's only like maybe 20 grams lighter than the X9D, both loaded full up. Another thing that I typically do to radios, and full disclosure, this isn't mine. I'm borrowing it from a friend just so I could model these grips and also to do this review, is removing these front shoulder switches. Just makes the radio way more comfortable to hold. FPV community, we don't need all the switches that are on this radio to start with, so losing these 2 up here makes it way easier to hold, especially if you're like the hybrid pincher. Gives you a place to put your fingers, and it just feels a lot better with these 2 switches being removed. So before I get into this radio and tear it down and show you the insides of it, I would really appreciate if you go down there and smash that like button. And if you're not subscribed, why not hit that button? It costs you nothing and it helps me out tremendously. It helps me bring sweet products like this to you for review and the in-depth look that I try to bring to my viewers. And if you really want to support me, if you really like what I'm doing, you really want to help me out, head over to Patreon. I upload content there first for you to see before the masses, and I would greatly appreciate it. Patreons are gold in this hobby. I really appreciate it. All right, let's get into this guy. And we got to pull the little grips off the sides too. And there we go. So nothing attached to the back. This is a very strange feature here. Looks like it's provisions for if I had to guess, that'd be for a bigger speaker. Oh, that's kind of weird. So looking at the main board, nothing funky. Well, you know, I take that back. Look at this guy right here. This is clearly an afterthought here. This little board is kind of scabbed onto everything else, and it's just kind of held in with a little bit of, I don't know, it looks like, oh, it's literally held in by solder. Look at that. Would you look at that? So this cap here is kind of just bridged the big old nasty glob of solder holding this little board in here, which has, I don't know what the components these are, but that is pretty jank right there. Not gonna lie, that's kind of weird. Not really liking that. Not that I think that'll cause any problems, but it is weird you see this. This is clearly something done after production. STM microcontroller here. You got your EEPROM battery there, and here is your internal multi-protocol module. It's not a diversity setup. It's a single antenna setup. When it comes to setting up your model, select internal module and then select the appropriate protocol that you want to use for this guy here. If you wanted to replace your springs, because it does come with an extra set of springs to change your tension, you will have to get this back cover off, and you can remove your springs fairly easily through here. It looks like they already have removed the tensioning bar for the throttle side. This is setup mode 2. Lots of little ribbon cables everywhere, which, I'm not a huge fan of ribbon cables. They seem to cause a lot of fault very easily. They're nice and light and cheap, but they do tend to be a little more brittle in my experience. Getting these shoulder switches off is kind of a real pain in the butt because they are soldered to a PCB. So that PCB had to come out and have the switch desoldered from it. You have a headphone jack here, and I don't know why they use this stupid old USB port here, just like in the back of the Taranis X9D. Freeze got smart enough to get away from that with the micro USB. But, I would say if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but it's a pretty terrible connector. We have 2 shoulder sliders here, and like we saw on the front, we've got 2 pots in the front. These feel like they have a detent, but it is very, very marginal. Like, you really got to be feeling for it. And it's very light, and there's not a whole lot of detentiness. Is that even a word? Detentiness to it. These do have detents. They're a little more pronounced, but not much. They're not like FR Sky detents, like you're hitting a speed bump, So that's the inner guts of the Jumper T16. Everything seems to have, like a lot of the screws here seem to have a little bit of a torque seal on them, or some sort of Loctite-esque type compound on them. There's your haptic feedback motor. This is your battery port and your SD card. It's held in with just hopes and dreams, guys. There's really not a whole lot holding it. It probably just gets pinched between the 2 clamshells, but no actual fasteners holding it down. You can see that was already loose. This little ribbon cable keeper, go ahead and click that guy back down. I would say if I was traveling a lot with this radio, I think job number 1 would be to get in here and put some like E6000 adhesive on every one of these connections here, because these are very low detent. They pop off really easy. And the last thing you want to do is, after you get done traveling, pull out your radio and something not work. That would be exactly what I would do, is kind of attach those. All of these spots should all be this type of connection. This is way more robust and way more secure. Coincidentally, probably more expensive if I had to guess. The gimbals are definitely Hall effect gimbals. You can kind of see the Hall effect element right there. Very nice job there. What soldering is on the gimbals looks really good. You can make the throttle side have that ratcheting effect if you wanted to, just by tightening down this bar here, and this one here is your tension bar. So through the back of the radio you can adjust your left to right, stick tension through this hole and through this hole, and you're up and down through that hole right there. As far as your tension for your throttle side, you do have to get the back off to adjust these two bars. So this is good. Like once you get it set, you can forget it, but then you still have to muss around with these guys to get it the way you want. But that's it. That's pretty much it for the internal tour of this radio. Go ahead and slap her back together. Okay, so who's this radio for? Well, it's for anybody who doesn't already have one of these. Because if you have one of these, you're probably not flying Spektrum or FlySky. You're probably indoctrinated into the FrSky ecosystem, or maybe Crossfire. If you have this, don't bother with this. This is a really nice radio, but I don't think it's worth upgrading. It doesn't offer that much, and if you wanted the multi-protocol module capabilities, just buy one for this guy. But, you know, variety is the spice of life, so, you know, if it floats your boat, go for it. What I would really like to see on this thing, really like to see, is if there would be a way to kind of make a, I don't know, a jumper tango type radio out of this. Use this awesome LCD screen that's on here for something useful, like piping in your FPV feed. How freaking sweet would that be to have this monster LCD screen piped into your FPV feed? Yeah. Well, I ain't that smart. I don't know how to do that kind of stuff. And if this was my radio, I'd definitely try to make that happen. But it may be totally impossible. I have no idea. I'm just the good idea fairy over here. That's all I'm doing. I think that would make this hands down the best radio on the market. If somebody out there could make that happen. And I know you guys are out there. I know you know how to do this kind of stuff. But anyways, I just, you know, I don't know if I would upgrade over this. This is tried and true, does everything, is super solid. It's sitting well in the FPV ecosystem as far as like OpenTX goes. I know there's a little bit of drama here, but then there's also the X9 Lite if you want a little bit smaller form factor with the same full-size gimbals and capabilities, except for that is access only, so no more D8 without getting a module for it. But my all-time favorite radio and my daily driver is still this, the X-Lite Pro. My favorite radio I have ever, well, no, I take it back. My Nirvana was my favorite radio, except for the software was a hot mess on that thing. This is my favorite radio, and it's my daily driver right now. I'm taking form over function for this. I don't mind the small gimbals. I really appreciate the light and small form factor. I'm not a gamer, but this appeals to me. All right, guys, what do you think? What do you think of the T16 compared to the other stuff on the market? And don't say Tango 2. I don't really care about the Tango 2. Nobody's seen one, but I hear it's coming out. So that might be interesting when it comes out. But we'll see. That remains to be seen. Let me know what you think. If you got any comments or questions, please put them down there in the box below. I really appreciate it. Again, smash that like button. Subscribe if you're not. Head over to Patreon. And if you're interested in the grips for the T16, the X9 Lite, the X9D, the QX7, eventually I'll have something for the X-Lite. That's coming soon. Head over to my Etsy. I really appreciate it. This stuff is kind of like what keeps me going in this hobby. I don't charge much and I don't make much on these, but it's my way of giving back to everybody in the community. All right, guys, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for checking this out, and I will FrSky you next time. Bye.